I would be very, very happy if this film helps to relax people's gender fights and to really see that we are planted into a much bigger picture these days. And I would really love for the community to come closer together, whether it's trans people or gay people or queer people, non-binary. I would really love for us to come together.
Hello, my name is Michael Stütz and I'm the head of the Panorama section of the Berlin International Film Festival. Today it is my utmost honor to welcome German director Monika Treut here to talk about her film Generation. Monika Treut has had over 13 films in the past 35 years here in the Berlin Film Festival in several sections, from Forum to Panorama. She screened many films here in the Panorama section, and in 1999 she presented a groundbreaking documentary, Gendernauts. And Generation now is 20 years later a follow-up to that specific wonderful film, and I'm very happy to talk with Monika about that today. Monika, it's a pleasure to have you here to talk about your new film Generation, screening also in Panorama this year. You screened Gendernauts here in 1999 in Panorama, which Generation is a follow-up on. So how did it start, or when did you start? When did you know you wanted to make sort of a follow-up to Gendernauts and meet some of the protagonists again?
Well, I thought it would be really interesting to find out more what has happened to my Gendernauts in the meantime. The world has changed so much since the late 90s. We had, it was 9/11 happened. The whole world was really shattered by a lot of different events. And I mean, San Francisco as a city has changed tremendously as well. We have gentrification, we have Silicon Valley in the neighborhood. So we have all the techies moving into San Francisco, buying up everything like apartments and houses, and rents went up incredibly high. So a lot of the trans people and the artists, the queer community had to move away from San Francisco. And plus, of course, we had all these years with Trump. And, the situation has worsened quite a bit. So I really was curious how my friends really were able to cope with these circumstances. So I just went and I was looking for them. And some had moved away really far away, like to Denver, Colorado. Max has moved there. And so it was almost turned into a kind of a road movie.
More than 20 years ago, I spent a lot of time in San Francisco. There I shot the film Gendernauts, with and about the pioneers who were on a journey through shifting identities. I was infatuated with their playful experimentation in what was arguably the Western Hemisphere's most creative city back then. Now I'm visiting my protagonists again. How do they live today? And how are they coping with a greatly changed world?
How did you end up with the protagonists in the film now? Were you always in touch with all of them? Did some of them say, I'd rather not participate in this one, or how did this come together?
For example, it was kind of difficult to track down Jordi Jones. Jordi had moved to Northern California first, and so I visited Jordi and his husband Marty on a small farm in Northern California, really far north. And before we started shooting, Jordi and Marty moved to Hawaii. And since we had, again, a small budget, we couldn't really afford to travel to Hawaii as well. So unfortunately, Jordi is missing in this film. And Tornado, the self-declared mother of Texas and an ex-lover of Stafford, it was a very sad story. So Tornado died of cancer. So life really, crushed into the film. And what can you do? Life moves on. And more than 20 years later, the living situation has turned out quite different for some people.
When I first came out, I thought, people are crazy here. There's no way I would ever live in this heat. But the more I came out and the more I met the people, and the more I figured out, well, you can be very comfortable, you can carry your ice water, you can, stay inside when it's too hot. And I realized you can live here without being rich.
You've worked also on this film with Elfie Mikesh, who you've been collaborating with since the beginning, basically. You founded your company, Hyena Films. You worked on your first feature-length film together. You did many collaborations together. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the nature of your collaborative spirit together with Elfie.
It was such a joy that Elfie was able to come with us to California again. Elfie was also doing the camera work in Gendernauts, and she was also very interested in getting in touch again. And it was just wonderful to share our experience and also compare to what has changed in the meantime. It was just really a great time we spent together as well. Of course, we had some mishaps as well. Our camera got stolen. I had a gun put to my head. It was, it's the gap between rich and poor is so wide in San Francisco. They call it the San Franciscan jewels. You see glass on the streets everywhere. So people do break into cars, and you had to be quite, really taking care of your surroundings when you were moving with the camera in the city. So it happened to us. And it was kind of a difficult thing to try to find a new camera and keep on going. I think we had quite a few different camera types in this film as well. So it was a bit tricky in post-production to match them all.
Yeah. And as you also said, the film is also not just a revisiting of all these wonderful protagonists from Annie Sprinkle to Sandy Stone, which you mentioned, in all different kinds of places and environments that they create for themselves and their communities. But as you said, it's also a road movie, which is of course also very visible in the films and with the shots that you decide to take in, because of course they're very intimate scenes where you have conversations and the protagonists talk about their life and their experiences, looking back but also looking forward. But then again, you also have very many beautiful shots of the landscape of America and the wideness and everything of it. So there's a lot of room to breathe in the images as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you kind of decided with Elfie together, what kind of images you needed for the film, in contrast maybe to the many conversations.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of tough theory in the film on one hand. So Susan Stryker, for example, she's really elaborating on gender theory and trans theory. So I felt that we needed shots of the landscape to breathe, to digest what is being said. We actually traveled in different portions. So I had two of my students with me. So the longer trips, we did just the three of us. Two of my really wonderful young students and I, we were driving from Denver to the desert through New Mexico, and we could actually see the climate changes. It was so dry. We couldn't believe what happened with fires coming up everywhere. So it wasn't even as bad as last year when we were traveling, but you could actually feel it, the danger. And, that's what Sandy is talking about quite a bit in California, what people go through with the fire danger. And then the big companies, they just, cut off electricity, and out of the southern parts of California without electricity. So it's really unbelievable what's going on. Yeah, so we try to do different types of imagery. So we try to be really close to the protagonist and then also leave some room to breathe.
Some people settle in their identity. I certainly have not. I think I could still be anywhere in that spectrum, depending upon how I'm relating to whoever the other person is. Identity is partly constructed in interaction. But I think as people grow older, they grow into themselves, but that means differently for different people.
How long did you actually shoot? How long were you in America and did this kind of trip and meeting people? And how much time did you have for that?
Well, it was quite an adventure in a way, because you never knew whether you could, for example, meet with Stafford, who runs a moving business, and Stafford's schedule is kind of unpredictable. So it could have been that Stafford out of the sudden would have gotten a big job, and then whoops, where is Stafford? So he's not in the desert. So we were kind of, we had to improvise quite a bit. And I did a research trip beforehand, and some of the research material actually made it into the finished film. But the main shooting time was about 6 weeks, where we had some breaks in between because people were out of the sudden having a different job to do. And so it was a bit tricky, I have to say. And I'm really, really glad it turned out as it did. It's a risky thing to do these types of documentaries, low budget documentaries, and you need to have some kind of adventurous spirit as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. For me, what's really striking is that in terms of looking on, queer narratives or queer history writings, everything that was kind of documented and told in the last 20, 30, 40 years, that this is quite a rare thing for a continuation like this, like what you do with Genderation, a revisitation. And at the same time, you portray these people and what changed in their lives and what necessities they have to do and deal with. And on the other hand, you wonderfully elegantly also kind of paint a portrait of a country, and in a society, in a very specific, difficult time with a lot of hardship. So this was very striking for me, that we have that very rarely, sort of a continuation in queer narratives and queer history writings in that sense, So I was wondering, what's yours? Did you ever think about that in a certain sense as well? Or did this just come very organically that you wanted to make this film?
Actually, I wasn't really aware how people would react even to Gendernauts when it first came out. So I was I was really, really happy that it seemed to have made a big impact on certain people. I remember there was people coming to me, even like parents of young trans people, who cried and hugged me and said through Gendernauts they, for the first time, really understood their own kid. So that was quite moving, the experience I had with the impact Gendernauts had on people. And then, you know better than I do probably all the conflicts which came about in the queer community, hostilities among different groups, like for, gay people against trans people. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And I felt that I really wanted to find a way to go against this type of what Susan Stryker calls horizontal hostilities between groups who basically have the same enemies. And I thought these older people by now, I mean, Susan and Sandy and Stafford and Max, they grew into their identities more or less, and they have a very relaxed feeling towards their lives and towards their experiences with gender and identity. So what I hope with Genderation to do now is to kind of, well, it's hard to say because, I don't want for it to have like a mission in that way, but I would be very, very happy if this film helps to relax people's gender fights and to really see that we are planted into a much bigger picture these days. And I would really love for the community to come closer together, whether it's trans people or gay people or queer people, non-binary. I would really love for us to come together.
Yes, well, that's beautifully said. And I think I've spoken to Wieland about your film a few days or week ago, where I said, I think the film has a very unifying power to it. So it's basically what you hope for. And I see and feel it. Would be good to, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, that's the frustrating part right now, because you can feel when you sit in the movie theater, when you sit.
Of course.
There, you feel the audience breathing, laughing, or, kind of going a little angry. So, and then you really feel how a film comes across. I mean, I'm very happy that you seem to like it, but I miss that feeling.
Yes.
I really miss it.
I mean, Genderation, of course, will be hopefully released at some point in theaters, and we will have to film at many festivals and discussions with a live audience. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me about your new film, Generation, which screens in Panorama this week in the market and later on, of course, also for the public. Monika, I wish you all the best, and I really hope we're going to see each other very soon in person again.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
Thanks so much, Michi, for having the film.
It's my pleasure. Right. All of our pleasure. Ciao, Monika.
Thanks.
Tschüss.
Bye-bye.